Okay, so any questions while you're getting set up? Any questions on anything that you get? Okay, so let's start search. Okay. So we're going to start with the weight and fit graph again. And so you saw that what you really would like to do is somehow inform everybody, not just how far you got, how far you traveled to get to them, but how far you have to go from them to get to the shortest goal. Shortest goal. Okay? So, suppose I were to add to each of these nodes the number corresponding to the true distance from them to the goal node. Suppose I just did it by some magic. Okay, so for example, for A I would do what? 9 would be the true distance from A. Okay, from B it would be what? 25.2, and from C it will be 25.1, from D it will be 25, and that's it. So then for each node I know how much distance I traveled to get to that node, that's the G value. And then I call this other number that I'm making up, I'll call this, for things that become clear in a minute, I'll call this H star. Okay, so H star for A would be 9, right? And for B would be 25.2. For C, it would be 25.1. For D, it would just be 25. So now each node has a G value, and in this particular case, an H star value. Okay, so what I would like to do is to sort the nodes not in terms of how long I traveled to get to that node, but sort them in terms of the total distance I expect to travel on a path from the root node through this node to the goal node. Remember when I say node already includes the path from the root node to that node. Did you understand that? Node means it includes the path from the root node to that node. So a path going through that node, I want to get its cost. Okay, now in this case I just gave you the real cost. The real one. Okay? So what happens when you do that? What happens when you do that is, so A would be expanded, and so now I have these two numbers, then somehow I need to combine them, right? And basically, as I said, the total path cost would be G of n plus this H of n. In our case, H star of n. So we will call that F. F value. So F value of the node is G value of the node plus this H value, which is an estimate on how far to go. In this particular case, I just made the estimate to be real one, to give you an idea of what happens. And what happens there, of course, is that when it's A equal to, so you start with M0, A0, then you have B. So this is, of course, I'm sorry, this one is still the bad search tree. Had you added that, you would have known right away. Okay, if I added that, I would basically be saying 0.1 plus 25.2 for B. Okay, versus G, which is 9. So on the search queue, I would have N1 sitting with 35.2 plus 0.1, which is 25.3, N2 sitting with G equal to 9, F equal to 9 plus 0. Because it is already a goal node, right? So then, of course, I would have picked N2. I would stop. I'm done. Would this be wrong? Of course not, because I'm telling you exactly what the cost of the path from any node to the goal node is. And if I am essentially truly sorting by the shortest paths, then the path to the goal that I find first would actually be the shortest path. Now the only problem, of course, is where do I get this H star? An idea would be to run breadth first search and the uniform cast search under this node and find the optimal path and then use it. Do keep this in mind. To compute the H star, you're doing problem that's harder than the original problem. Original problem just wanted you to get to the goal node with an optimal solution. To compute H star, you would need to know the optimal way of going from every node in the search tree to the goal node. If you do this, you're done. Okay, but what this does bring up is if you inform the search about the distance to the goal, somehow even something as evil as bait and switch graph is closed. It's very easy. Now what's interesting is, of course, if you do the same thing with the previous graph, it will still work. If you have this, what happens? It will still work. Why? Because you start with a, B would be 1 plus, 1 is the G value, plus 4 is the H star value. Okay? So 4 plus 1, 5, which is still better than 9, so you will expand B. And then you will get to C. C would be 2 plus 3, 5. You will again expand C. In fact, one of the interesting things is the F value. So B's F value was 5. C's F value was also 5. Right. Then you come to D, 3 plus 2, 5. Do you see a pattern here? Everybody's F value with the perfect heuristic, if the node is on the optimal path with the perfect heuristic, its F value would actually be the shortest path casting. It's not surprising because I just went and put the shortest path card there. You already have the G, which is the optimal way of getting to that node because it's currently the shortest path. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, in essence, only the nodes whose F values are equal to the G star would ever be expanded. G star being the cost of the optimal goal. Those would be the only nodes that will be expanded. That's the best that can ever happen to you. Everything else is bad from now onwards. No, actually we can't do what I'm saying, right? Because that will require getting H star. So the question then is, what can I do if I am really putting an estimate? Okay? If I'm not putting the perfect value, but if I'm putting an estimate, okay, so computing the true distance to a goal is as hard as the full search from every node. That doesn't make any sense. But it's a good idea to first look at the dumb idea and then improve it. So instead, you want to bound the value, the cost of the path from the node to the goal. A bound means it's basically an estimate on the true value. Now estimates can be bounded from below or above. Which one is better? Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm going to get an estimate, right? So the h of n, instead of getting h star, I just get h of n. The question is h of n going to be, how is h of n supposed to be related to h star of n? We don't know what h star is. But we're just trying to ask ourselves, if I'm going to estimate h, should I be estimating a lower bound or an upper bound on the true distance? It's a reasonable question, right? Imagine doing upper bound. Imagine that you basically say, you throw an upper bound. In fact, you just go ahead and say, the amount of work to be done after this node to get to the goal is infinity. It's the most efficient search you can do in your life. When you don't even feel like doing anything, that's what you are saying. Oh my God, it's too hard. Let's not do it. Right? If you put h equal to infinity, which is clearly an upper bound for every possible true value, you would do the least amount of search. Which is great, cause for celebration, but you won't get the solution. If you don't do anything, you don't get anywhere. Okay, if you don't do anything, you'll get done very fast thinking. So am I going to do it this way? Am I going to do that? No, I'll stop thinking. I'm done already. But I have not gotten either optimally or inoptimally to the goal. You understand what I'm saying? So if you put H as an upper bound, you can already see things aren't going to work. Efficiency wise it's great, but completeness is gone. And optimality, there's no completeness, where is optimality? Now think of lower bound. The infinity is upper bound of everybody. What is the lower bound of all the distances? 0. Suppose I put H equal to 0, what happens?
You're just back at the beginning.
That's exactly what we did. But what's good about it? It's optimal. It's complete. So I already did dimension analysis and I realized if this is H star, I don't know where the heck H star is. If I can convince myself that I'm below it, I'm better off than if I'm above it. If I'm above it, looks like completeness is done. If I'm below it, I know at least this uniform cast search, which we just proved to ourselves, it's complete and optimal. So this, if you ever get worried as to what is admissibility again, is H supposed to be admissible by some connection to H star? Is it lower or upper bound? You always ask yourself, what would uniform cast search do? It's like, what would Jesus do? Uniform cast search would put H equal to 0. Uniform cast search is our friend. It guarantees optimality. Okay? So we should be below H star because 0 is always below H star. We don't know where H star is, but 0 is lower bound of everybody, positive. Infinity is upper bound of everybody, positive. You see what I'm saying? So I just kind of argued to you in a kind of an informal way that lower bound cast is what you want. If you have lower bound cast and you do search with A star, then basically if the F instead of G, then you would get A star. And uniform cast search is already A star. It just puts H equal to 0. It just didn't know. Just as breadth first search was already uniform cast search. It just put G of n equal to D of n instead of actually adding the edge cast. And A star, uniform cast search is nothing but A star search with H equal to 0. So we have the wiggle room we have. The wiggle room we have is for each n there is some H star of n. This side bad. This side up to 0 good. Good is what's called admissible heuristic. If I can get you a bound that is guaranteed to be lower than the true cast, guaranteed to be lower than the true cast, then if you do search with it, you would be optimal, and of course complete. Okay, now the question then is, it also tells you, this argument also tells you which, if I give you two heuristics such that H1 is here and H2 is here. H2 is closer to H star. Which one would you rather use? H2. Right? As long as you are below H star, you will get optimal. If you are equal to H star, that is nirvana. Probably because you're dead. And because essentially, because there is no way you would have gotten H star anyway. If you got H star, you would have done the least amount of expansions. You would do expansions that are just proportional to the depth of the node, depth of the whole node. Now you might say, oh, isn't that what depth first does? It also does something proportional to the depth of the node, right? What? It does, but it is memory. It's not the number of expansions. Number of expansions that depth first does is still B over D. A star is saying, if you give me a star, I'll just do linear number of expansions. That's as good as it gets. Right? You have to do at least the work that's proportional to the size of the path. Right? Okay? So that's as good as it gets, and furthermore, lower bound is good. Furthermore, after two bounds that are below H star, if one is closer to H star, you take that. That will do lower number of expansions while still being optimal. If you understand this, you understand H star. That's it. The rest of what we will do is try to push these intuitions into you more. Okay, whatever I said has all sorts of additional implications that you may not have realized already. So for example, what is this function h? What does it mean to say h is, oh I actually have a board, I did not even realize. What does it mean to say that h1 is less than h2? These are two functions over nodes. It may be less than h2 in one node, but more than h2 at a different node. You're really talking about h1 being less than h2 everywhere. And furthermore, what if I have a heuristic which is less than the true cost for almost all nodes, but in one node it's actually a little higher? Is the heuristic admissible? No. Because admissibility is a for all condition. For every search node, the estimate you give must be less than the true cost from that node to the goal node. That's admissibility. It's a for all. Now, the interesting big issue, so by the way, so A star essentially has G of n, H of n, F of n, as I said, as long as H of n is less than or equal to H star of n, which is the perfect heuristic, which is the true cost from where you are to the goal node, done. Now, of course, an idea that, the question of course is how do I get these lower bound heuristics? Right? It's, I understand that getting the true cost seems to be costly because you need to do search. How do you get the lower bounds? One obviously great idea is to find out what H star is and do a little less than that. And if any of you fell for that, hit yourself really badly on your back, right? Because it's not even stupid, it's beyond stupid, right? Because you got nirvana and decided to fall out of it. You got H star, and rather than use H star, you say, H star is perfect, I need admissible. So let me reduce some number from that. What are you trying to impress? The instructor. Right? So clearly you are not going to do that. Clearly you are not going to get admissibility by first finding H star and proving to yourself, and then making sure that every place it's less. Now, however, when I put a heuristic, okay, I'll come back to this in a minute. I'll also come back to this in a minute too. So, actually, let me get you an example. Wow, there's so many here. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so here is the example, right? So suppose I put a heuristic. I am going to put a heuristic on this graph. Okay, and you tell me whether it is a lower bound or not. Okay, there is a magenta heuristic. Is the magenta heuristic admissible?
No.
Why not?
For C, it is 28.
C, it is 28.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not good because true cost is 25.1. No, but it's okay for B, right? But it's also okay for D, it's okay also for A, that's not good enough. For it to be admissible, it has to be a lower bound at every node. For graphs like this, you actually figured out in your head what the true costs are and you convince yourself, yeah, it's less. This is great for exam questions. Exam questions will be exactly like this. Right? Right? Furthermore, in fact, one of the interesting questions is, what is the highest value C can have as the heuristic for it to be still admissible? 25.1. Right? Now you're all awake. Imagine that the graph you're seeing is undirected. There are no arrows. Now, what is the highest value C can have as its heuristic so that it can be admissible? What? No, so if these edges are not directed, they are undirected. Now I'm asking you, what is the H value C can have such that it will still be admissible? Okay, some people are saying 25 point blah blah blah. Who are all saying 25 point blah blah blah? Stand behind your convictions. Donald Trump does. Right. Who are the ones? 25 something. Okay. These are all undirected edges. So you say 25 something. Some other people are mumbling 9 point something. Who are those? Okay. Why is it 9 point something? Why is 9 point something?
Because you could travel back.
Exactly. It's undirected. So if you are ever on a road and it says it's no longer one way, you can turn back and go the other way. You don't have to keep going on this way. It's become undirected. When it's undirected, the graph, just because I oriented it that way doesn't mean you must always go down. There is no such thing. Right? So from C you can go this way and it's 9.2. So that too is a nice exam question. I'm not saying it will happen, but you should be able to understand these kinds of things. But if you are really doing A-star search and the way you are checking whether the heuristic is admissible or not involves checking every node and the best cost path from that, you are sunk. This is like Bozo theory. It's like these kinds of theories called like competence theories which have no applications. So there must be ways in which you can get heuristics. Heuristics that are actually by just construction guaranteed to be lower bounds. Let's think of some. Whenever you're talking about infinite number of things and you want to prove a property, math proofs is what we do normally. You don't go by saying, yeah, I have infinite numbers, I have to check this property, let me just do it one by one. That way it will take a little longer than expected, right? So you do some kind of a mathematical induction proof or some other kind of a proof, right? So if you have path planning on a plane, you have a plane, so this is a plane, even though it's not really a plane, but it's a plane, okay? It's a inclined plane. And I'm trying to find my way to the nearest sleeping person so that I can hit them on the head. That's my goal, right? Right? So the question then is, what's my H value? Okay, so for wherever I am, I need to find out what's the cost to the nearest sleeping person. Okay, now the true H star value is basically going around you guys without, making you particularly scared of it, right? But I can imagine for a while, everybody just disappeared. It's an empty room. I can go directly to the person I want to hit. Right? Then, how would I do it? As a crow flies, as Rao flies. It's basically straight line distance. Straight line distance between 2 points is guaranteed to be a lower bound, is the lower bound in terms of the distance between those 2 points. In your best case, the distance between 2 points would be the straight line distance. Any other time, it's more than that. So, if you're doing search in the search in the plane, which is basically path planning sorts of things, you take straight line distance, you are guaranteed to have lower bound. You didn't have to check, is this correct here, is this correct here? It's guaranteed to be correct. Do you see what I'm saying? So you saw 8 puzzle problem, right? You guys know the 8 puzzle problem. So which is basically you have this, you have a problem like this, this is 8 puzzle problem, essentially you wind up, so it's nine holes and basically you're trying to move them around until you get to a particular configuration. So you are in this, let's say this arbitrary configuration, I want to get to this nice happy configuration which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And the tricky thing, of course, in this problem is you can only move things, in a particular way. You can't just move them over the slides. You basically can slide them into the blank space. So in fact, in 8 puzzle, which is actually used to be the project for this course, and in fact, a lot of textbook description is in terms of 8 puzzle too. It's better to think of not tiles moving, but the blank space moving. Right? You move the tiles into the blank space. You can just orient yourself to think that blank space is moving around. And blank space can only move into its neighbors. It can only move into its left neighbor, right neighbor, up neighbor, down neighbor. That's about it. Right? That's the way the problem is. So if I want to, for example, say how many moves the blank space has to make, my God, I'm starting to sound like Taylor Swift, but how many moves the blank space has to make to get to this configuration, okay, right? Of course, if I know the exact number, that's what the search is going to compute for me. So, one idea for heuristics is abstract the problem, remove the constraints in the problem and solve it. And the solution you get for the abstracted problem has to be a lower bound on the real problem. That's what I did when I was trying to hit people on the head. Let me assume that I can just walk through people. That's not true in the real world. Okay, or let me assume that everybody disappeared other than the person that I want to hit. Then, in that case, the shortest path is just straight line distance. There is no search required. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, the other possibility is basically, so in the case of 8 puzzle, then how do I get the lower bound? One idea is, so you have to think in terms of, the question of how to get heuristics becomes one of how to abstract the problem. The too much abstraction you do, you will get a heuristic which will be a lower bound. Okay, but it's not going to be particularly efficient. Too little abstraction you do, it will be closer to H star, but computing the heuristic might be costly. Right? So the question in the case of 8 puzzle, for example, so one abstraction I can do is to assume that I can lift the tiles and put them in the right place. Right? If I do that, then how many moves do I need to make? For everybody who is in the wrong space, I have to lift it. So just count the number of misplaced tiles. The number of misplaced tiles is a guaranteed lower bound on the total number of moves you are actually likely to make. Okay? Now, that's one abstraction. So that's one abstraction, which is just count the number of misplaced tiles. Okay? The other abstraction is to realize that even when I have the ability to lift the tile and put it in the right place, it's not a single move. Suppose if the tile, let's say 6 here, to come to here, right, it needs to make really 2 moves. It needs to come down and side, or side and down. So at least that many moves it has to make. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so if I count the number of not misplaced tiles, but for each misplaced tiles, the Manhattan distance. Now, new idea, Manhattan distance. Manhattan distance in Manhattan, other than Broadway, right? Essentially, you go. And also Tempe distance is also true, but those people somehow don't say Tempe distance. In Manhattan, essentially, they have these horizontal and vertical, roads, right? So the way to go from one place to other, you don't get to do diagonals. Broadway is fun because it's actually a diagonal road. Otherwise, you go like this and up, or like that. That's called Manhattan distance. Now, it turns out, by the way, how do you compute the Manhattan distance? It's not that hard, right? Those of you who know, so if you have x1, y1, x2, y2, and you want to compute the straight line distance between them, it's x1 minus x2 whole square plus y1 minus y2 whole square, the whole thing square root. Right? It turns out the Manhattan distance is nothing but x1 minus x2 modulus plus y1 minus y2 modulus. That's it. Okay? Now actually it turns out these are all sorts of interesting connections. This Euclidean norm is considered L1 norm. And then Manhattan distance, L2 norm. And Manhattan distance becomes L1 norm. Because you are essentially taking modulus, absolute values, and not squaring it and taking the square root. You just take power by 1 and taking the power 1 square root, in effect. Okay? But Manhattan distance for 6 would be, basically take its x values for the current position and the right position and subtract that, add that to the y values difference. Always take the absolute difference, not just the, don't take the sum. If you do the Manhattan distance, clearly Manhattan distance is going to be better estimate than the number of misplaced tiles. And how much better? It turns out somewhere down the line, actually, let me talk about this. Somewhere down the line, I have some numbers. Actually, the textbook has numbers saying how huge a difference Manhattan distance makes with respect to search time compared to number of misplaced tiles. And this is where the other 3 parts of your project come into play. Then the first 4 parts are just, implement some search strategies. The other 3 parts ask you to come up with the best heuristic possible for this guy, Pacman. And the idea is you always want to be admissible, but you want to get the right kind of abstraction such that you get as close to H star as possible. Do you understand what I'm saying? And since I'm only computing there the number of node expansions, things are actually easier. If you can actually compute H star, you would be fine. The only problem, of course, is we're going to put actually a time limit for running your code, and if you're trying to compute H star at every node, you will die. Okay? Right? One other thing I want to point out, you will see this in a minute, when we're going back and forth on that. Okay. Another thing I want to point out is the different levels of abstraction. So there are 2 different levels of abstraction I talked about for Manhattan, for tile puzzle, right? There are even better abstractions, which are even closer to reality. So the misplaced tiles is less close to reality than Manhattan distance. And something called pattern database heuristics are even closer to reality. Okay, the closer you become to reality, the costlier it is to even compute the heuristic. But then it's so close to H star that the number of expansions you do will reduce. Okay, which actually makes me look at this picture. You should, anytime you're thinking about this course, think of this picture. I might say it more than once, but this is certainly one of those great pictures. Okay, because this tells you the true trade-off in heuristic search. Okay, it's an informal picture. Basically what I'm doing here is essentially on the x-axis are the heuristics. I just named them. H star is the optimal, the perfect heuristic. H0 is basically everybody is 0 heuristic. That means uniform cost search. Now, on the y-axis is the time taken to compute the heuristic. The total amount of time you spend computing the heuristics of each of the nodes during the search. Remember when you're doing a star search, one of the things you have to do now, you have to call h of n. Now you're thinking h of n would be just some table somebody already computed. No, you're going to compute the table. For simple problems, computing the table is cheap. For if you are actually using costly heuristics, computing the table can be quite costly. So here is the interesting thing, right? In terms of just the time you spend on the A stars during A star search, computing the heuristic, just if you counted all the time you spent computing the H values for all the nodes, and you add them up, that's the time you spend just computing the heuristics. That time increases as you go from H0 to H star. Because H star is basically running the full search for every node. Right? Now, on the other hand, this other curve is the number of nodes you would expand at the time you spend expanding the nodes given that heuristic. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is what uniform cost search does. It says everybody is 0. It barely takes any time to say everybody is 0. It takes one time. Right? But it pays by expanding large number of nodes. And every time it expands